Okay, so we're going to continue with learning the fundamentals about JavaScript. Right here on this side, I have a list of the things that we're going to be going over, and we're going to talk about them. I'll make some examples here on the console, and we'll be able to do a bunch of different things. So the first thing, what are data types and variables? So in JavaScript, let's create a new one called variables. Yep, okay. So variables, what are variables? Variables are a way to be able to set data. So for example, you can declare a variable like this, var name equals to Poncho. This is the variable declaration, var name. The name of the variable is name, and the equal is the assignment, the thing that you're referring to when you refer to name, which is Poncho. So in JavaScript, there's this other thing called console.log, and it will allow you to print whatever you want from within this script. So for example, if I run my script right now, I just get undefined. I don't print anything to the screen, right? But if I say console.log and then I console.log name, what should I see on the bottom? I should see Poncho. So Poncho here, right? So this is a variable declaration. You're declaring the variable here, the name, then you are giving it its value. Another way to write this is we can say var name and then semicolon. This will just declare the variable without any value. If you declare a variable without any value, JavaScript will assign the undefined to it. So if we run this, it just says undefined here, right? So you can also write it in a separate line, which could say like name equals Poncho, right? So if we run this, now we see Poncho here. Let me clear it so you can, whoops, I think you run clear like this. Okay, so we can see it like it actually appears. So let's run it again, and we should see Poncho on the console log, which we do. This is another way to write our variables. Okay. So data types in JavaScript. So let's talk about data types. What are data types in JavaScript? Right now, we're going to go over a few data types. Data types are numbers, right? That is one data type. Whoops. Number. Undefined was the one that we saw before this. Let me actually write it on top. Undefined. Number. Another one is boolean. Oh, actually, he wrote them there. Data types in JavaScript are strings. So let's maybe do it the way he said it. So strings are like the thing that I wrote, Poncho. That is a string, right? Another string could be like, hello, world. Yep. These are strings. Numbers is 9, 1337. Those are numbers. Booleans are either a true or a false. In JavaScript, you can just say true or false. And that is actually how you declare a Boolean. Objects. So objects are, they're not primitive data types. And I think we should talk about objects a little bit later because we have a section there. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. And we already know what undefined is. It just means it has no value. Undefined. It means that there is nothing there. It's just, there's nothing like attached or the representation of that variable. Oh, and we can also talk about null. Null is a type where you use in order to let's say not keep it undefined, because undefined is kind of like I have no idea what this means. Null means like, hey, it's empty right now, but in the future I'm going to put something there, right? So null, it's kind of like a placeholder. It's something that you can use in order for it to, at a later time, you fill it in with a name, a last name, an age, a city, a date, a number, any type of a thing, right? So, for example, let's say var name equals to null, right? So let's say you want to do this. The reason why you want to do this is because if you hit a server in Japan or in Indonesia, somewhere around the world, and let's say it's going to take like a second for that data to get here, you don't want it to be just undefined. Usually undefined is frowned upon, and it's not good manners to leave it undefined. So you want to put it null. In a second, right? A second later, it could be set to name equals to that response that you got, which is going to be Poncho. That's one example, but we're going to get into more details as we move along. Variables are a way to store the different data types. And yes, these are all values, right? These are all strings. They're primitive data types. But they can be referenced by an actual variable. So we can say var name equals to Poncho. We can say var greeting equals to hello world. Var games equals to 9. Var IP port equals keyboard error equals to 1337. Var eat equal to true. Var something to false. Let's say drink equal to false. So we're just creating a bunch of variables, right? We can even set it to undefined. Var idk equal to undefined. And then let's say var party equal to null, right? So here we can just so this is how we declare the variables, and this is how we also give a data type to that variable. These are primitive data types, but we'll move into higher advanced data types in the very near future. Right now we'll talk about arrays and objects, but these are things that you can declare within the JavaScript language. And what I would suggest right now as an exercise is to console.log all of these different things. So for example, let's say I don't know, and then run it, right? And you'll see undefined there. Also, something that you should keep in mind is that console.log takes multiple arguments. So you can put in a string before like the variable that you want to see, separated by a comma, in order to know that that thing that you're writing or that you're seeing on the bottom is the thing that you are console logging. So for example, we can say a string separated by a comma, and then here we can say idk, and let's do an arrow so it looks nice, right? I don't know. And then we can do like console.log, and then we can do a port, and then we do this with separated by a comma, and let's say port. And if we run that, now we see I don't know and port right on the bottom. So what I want you to do is just console log this using those two arguments so you can see which one belongs to which one, and do that for every single line that we have. That way you become more familiar. So just a quick recap what we went over. Strings are a way to write sentences, paragraphs, text inside of JavaScript. Numbers are integers. We can do a bunch of mathematical things with those. Booleans are a true or false statements. And we will see how we can use this a little bit later. But we can say like, hey, if this is true, do this. If this is false, do this, right? So we can use those Booleans in such a way where we can run parts of our code or not run other parts of our code. And null is a placeholder, right? We're going to put something there in the near future. But for now, let's just put this temporary placeholder for now, and then we'll add something later. Undefined means I have no idea. Usually it's bad manners if you leave it undefined, depending on the person. But yeah. Oh, one more thing that I want to talk about is, I don't know if you noticed that I'm writing these semicolons. In JavaScript, we usually want to write these we do want to write these semicolons because it allows us to keep separation of each line of code. So it's kind of like also good manners if you're working with somebody else to put your semicolons, right? Usually I sometimes write code and I write them until the end when I'm going to commit to make it look nice. But what I would suggest is to always keep your semicolons. They don't do anything really syntactically. JavaScript kind of like adds them for you because he goes like, he probably forgot to add them. But I would suggest to start putting them because it is good manners. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. What are conditionals? Conditionals are statements. Conditional statements are if and else statements. They are a way to execute code if a certain condition is met. So let's do a quick example here. Let's say, let's name our new snippet. Let's call it conditionals. All right. So conditionals are just basic statements. If you have this, do this, right? So if we have food, console.log, let's see. So we can declare a variable on top and say like var food equal to true. So if we run this true statement should enforce if this is true, do whatever's in between the curly braces. So once again, the if statement tells JavaScript, if whatever's inside of these parentheses is true, do whatever's inside of these curly braces. If it's false, don't go into the curly braces and just continue with the code. So given that food is true, we need to see this console log. So let's see it. And yes, we do see it on the bottom. Let's eat. If we change it to false, we won't see it. There's nothing there, right? So conditional statements are a way to be able to run certain parts of code as opposed to others. You can do else statements inside of here that you can connect to that if condition. So for example, we can add this else statement after the curly brace and say like, if this thing is not true, don't do this thing in between the curly braces, do this thing in the other curly braces. So let's put a console.log. Oops. Saying like, let's go, hungry, come on, no food. Okay, so we can change this to a false statement, which will not execute these curly braces, but it will execute the other curly braces. So if we run this, we can see hungry, no food on the bottom. And these are conditional statements, basically. We can add a bunch of other conditional statements in here. So we can say var drink equals to true. And then we can make another if condition on the bottom. If drink, right, execute this. And we can say console.log, log, and what are we going to console.log? Not or drinking water. Else, let's do this, which we can do a console dot log saying like no water. Cool. So right now drink is true. So we should see this console log, and because this is a separate if condition, we should also see the hungry statement on the bottom. So let's run our code. And yes, we do see the hungry on line number 6 because food is false. So we got into this if statement. And when we ran this if statement, if drink is true, we went over here. Console.log drinking water. If we change drink to false, it will hit the other curly braces on the bottom. So let's run it. Hungry, no food, no water, right? And if we change it to true and true up here, we should see both of these top console.logs, which is let's get some food, or I'm sorry, let's eat, and drinking water. Cool. We're going to go more into details, and we're going to use this in many different ways, but just for right now, I think this is a good starting point. So let's get rid of this right here, and let's move on to the next one. What are loops? Interesting. So let's create another one called loops. Okay. What are loops? Loops are a way to count up or down. Okay. So let's say we need to say hello multiple times, right? Let's say we're with our friends and we're going to a restaurant, or we're going to watch a movie, or we're going to do something, and we want to say hello, Maria, hello, Tom, hello, Ingrid, right? So a loop will allow you to move up and down or count a certain amount of times and repeat code a certain amount of times. So let's make a quick example. We can say var friend 1 equal to Maria. We can say var friend 2 equal to Tom, and var friend 3 equal to Ingrid. So now we can create our for loop. How do we create a for loop? I'm going to give you the syntax right now, which is basically a for. That's the statement that you need to start off with. Then you need to provide curly braces. There are 3 parts inside of this for loop. The first part is going to be so let me write them outside. The first part is the starting point. The second part is going to be the condition. Up to what point do you continue running this loop? And the third thing that you need to put in here is going to be after each iteration, what am I doing to that starting point? Am I adding by 1 every time? Am I subtracting by 1? So let's do a simple add now, but we need to do like the incrementer or the manipulation. Manipulation after each iteration. Okay, so inside of here we need to get a starting position, so we can say var I equals 0, and then we separate these 3 different statements by a semicolon, and we can do the condition up to what point do we want to stop. So we have 4 friends. So let's actually start it at 1. I think that would be simpler for most people. So if you say I is less than 4, right? So that means it's going to iterate 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then 4, it won't iterate anymore. And we can then do the manipulation after each iteration. And we can add I will equal I plus 1. So after each iteration, you're resetting the value of I equals 2, equals 3, so forth and so on. After you make your curly braces with your starting position, your conditional, and your manipulation, then you can do your curly braces. And this is going to be like what the code will run. Every single time you run that iteration, this is the code that we will run. So let's say console.log, and let's put here a string saying like, whoops, let's put it here. This is I, and then we can do a comma of I. So what do you think I is going to be? All right, I want you to think about it in your head right now, what we're going to see in the console on the bottom. A lot of times we might not know how code is working entirely, or a library is working entirely. So what I would suggest to do right now, a really good skill that you can learn is kind of becoming kind of like a scientist. You want to make a hypothesis of what you think you're going to see, and then run your code. And if you see what you think you're going to see, that means that you have a pretty good understanding and you can move on. If you get something totally different than what you think you're going to see, then I would suggest to go back and then try to read up on documentation or do other examples in order for you to build up that understanding. And a lot of times that's what I do most of the time. I don't understand everything. I don't know everything. And most of the time I'm console logging things in order for me to be able to get the appropriate understanding of how things are working. And if I'm console logging something and that's like what I'm expecting, I move on and continue with my code. So let's run it. Let's see what we see. We see this is I equal to 1. So that is the first iteration, right? I is equal to 1. Then we add 1 to I. So it's going to be 2. The next iteration, I is 2. And then we add another plus 1. I is equal to 3. And then we add another one. I is equal to 4. Now this is where our conditional statement takes effect, because 4 is not less than 4. So it is a false value. So you exit out of the for loop, right? So now I have another challenge here. So one of the first things that we did was like adding 3 plus 3, right? So if I wanted to show hello, comma Maria, hello, comma Tom, hello, comma Ingrid, how would I be able to do this? Try to do it in line number 9. Put pause on the video, try to do it, and then unpause it once you try to do it, or if you did it. Cool. So let's do it. Console.log, here we can do a plus sign. The same way where we can add different numbers, we can add different strings. So here, friend 1, 2, and 3 are all what's called variables. So what we can do is, this is, we can change this to hello, comma, and then name friend 1. So if we run this, we're going to see Maria, but there's going to be a problem here, because Maria is friend 1, but Tom is friend 2. Ingrid is friend 3. So this right here that you're writing, it's going to repeat Maria 3 times. And if we run that, we see this here. Maria is being run 3 times. So now there's kind of like this issue, right? There's kind of like, how are we going to be iterating over these friends? So there's multiple ways we can do this. One way is by putting a bunch of if conditions, right? And saying like, if it's this friend, console log this, right? Else console log this. Or if, like, we can say these 3 things. I think here maybe the easiest approach for you to understand would be to convert these into like just integers, 1, 2, and 3, right? Okay, friend, let me see. Let me see if it works. I don't know. So let's do this. Yep, it doesn't work. So okay. Hopefully you tried it and hopefully you succeeded. So we learned about if statements and what's it called? We learned also about console logging and numbers. So if you remember, we can make if conditions, right? So we can, the simplest way that we can do with the things that we've already learned is we can do an if statement saying like if, let's say I is equal to 1, console.log friend 1. Maybe let's do the string before friend 1 actually. Here like this, hello, comma, and then this one, and then we can add friend 1. Then we can do another if condition here, saying like if I is equal to 2, we can do this. If I is equal to 3, let's do this. So we can cut this out, and then in here we can say console.log log hello, and then plus friend 2, and then here we can do console.log hello plus friend 3. Okay, so this right now, I know that maybe we haven't learned about comparison operators, but I think we're going to learn about this also. So let me talk about this a little bit. These right here are comparison operators. When you write a single equal sign, a single equal sign means an assignment. You are assigning whatever's on the other side to be what the variable refers to, right? That is, you're setting a value there. When you do 2 equal signs or 3 equal signs, you're comparing this side to this side, and you're going to get back a boolean. So a true or a false statement. So on the first case, I will be a 1, so we are going to console log this thing inside. On the second iteration, I will be a 2, so this would be a true statement. These other 2 are going to be false, so I'm going to console log this one. And in the third iteration, the first 2 are going to be false, but this third one is going to be true. So we should be able to see our 3 friends here. I miswrote friend for and yeah, I think. Yeah, let's just copy and paste it. For and friend 2. All right, let's run it again. There you go. Hello, Maria. Hello, Tom. Hello, Ingrid. So one more time, let's go over the code and see like what's happening. Maybe let's try to break it down a little bit more. Maybe I can come up with a different way of explaining it. So what was the for loop? In order to declare a for loop, we need to set the for. A for loop basically is a way to run code a multiple amount of times, right? So the first thing that we're declaring within the parentheses is the starting point. Where do you want to start from? Do you want to start from 10 moving down to 0? Do you want to start from 0 moving up to 10? In our case, we are starting at 1, and we want to move up to the number that is less than 4. While this is a true statement, while this condition is true, we are going to continue iterating. The third statement is going to replace the value of I to a new assignment. So every single time you're iterating, you're manipulating the variable. So inside of here, this is the code that we're repeating. So the first time I is equal to 1, this is a true statement, so we are going to console log this one. And these other two are false statements. I is not equal to 2, and I is not equal to 3. So these will not execute. These, we said, these 3 equal signs are comparison operators. And we said we can write them as a strictly equals or a loosely equals, which is this right here. 2 equals basically means a loosely equals. In JavaScript, basically it means like they're kind of like the same. They are, right? With loosely equals, I would be very careful using this because a lot of times you might get unexpected behavior. We'll learn about truthy and falsy statements and what they mean to JavaScript, but sometimes you'll get something that you think will be truthy actually become a falsy. Right now, it just means kind of. I think they are. So we should get the same outcome right now, and we do. The second time around, once we iterate once, I gets raised up by 1, so I is 2. This is a false statement, and this is a false statement, but this one's a true statement, so you run into this one. And the third iteration, I is equal to 3. These top 2 are false. The one on line number 15 is a true statement. So you console log hello Ingrid. And then on the fourth iteration, I is equal to 4. So you hit this conditional. I is not less than 4. So you exit out of the for loop. And that's it. Yep, so let's just do one more thing here. We said that we can move from bottom to up, right? So here, if we subtract, right, we can say like, we can manipulate, let's say, remember what I said, like you can move from 0 to 9 or 9 to 0? Let's do the same thing here. So here, our starting place is going to be 4. And while 4 is greater than 1, right? So maybe 0 actually. And here our starting position should be 3. So we can actually hit this if statements. Because if we start at 4, we're not going to hit these if statements. So if we run this, we should see the same thing. And we do. Okay. But if you notice, now they're in a different order. Right? Because Ingrid is being the first one that gets said hello to. And Maria is the last one. On the other examples, it was Maria first and Ingrid last. So that is because we're moving from 3 to 1 as opposed to 1 to 3. Cool. So let's move on. Hopefully this was a little bit interesting. We'll do a lot more for loops in the near future. So also that's pretty cool. All right, so let's continue. The next thing we're going to learn about is functions. So what are functions? Let's rename it here. Whoops. So functions. What are functions? Functions are a way to execute code in a package. Functions can have multiple variables that can represent values and can be executed within the function to do whatever. Okay, so functions basically are a way to write code where we want to repeat that code or we want kind of like to do an action. So for example, if I say var watch movie equals to function, this is a function. We create a variable and we can assign it, equal it to a function. We use the keyword function. We use parentheses in order to accept arguments. Arguments are things that you can accept inside of the function and manipulate or run the function a certain way. And here in the curly brackets, it's what you're going to do when you invoke this function. So right now, let's just do a simple thing like console.log watching movie. All right. And this is a function declaration. You are declaring the function, the action you're performing. And in order to run this declaration, you need to invoke it. So we need to say the name of the function, which is watch movie. And then at the end, we can do parentheses. This is a function invocation. So we are running this function. So if we click the play button here, we can see watching movie, right? And that is what we have up here, watching movie. So we can also run this multiple times. That is something that's cool about functions that allows us to really work with them. So now we should be able to run this function 3 times because we invoked it 3 times, right? So it's kind of like a function is kind of like an action that you perform over and over. For example, wash dishes. I can create a function that will wash dishes, and whenever I call that function, it will do whatever's inside of the curly braces. So let's say, let's learn about arguments. We said that arguments are kind of like a thing that you can pass into the function in order for the function to do different actions. So for example, let's say we pass in like type of movie, right? So let's say if it's a horror movie, so we can say here like horror, right? We can say this console log, and we can say watching horror movie. Horror movie. So when we invoke our function here, let's remove these 3 for now. We can pass in that type, and that will be referring to this horror if we do like a strictly equal to type. Or actually, let's write it the other way so it's more clear. So we can write it like this, type strictly equals to horror. And then we pass in here horror. This if condition should fire, and we should be able to see this console log on the bottom. So let's run it. Let's clear this though. And we do. We see this if condition firing. We can do another one like if type is strictly equal to comedy. Let's do console.log. Let's do ha 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 ha. All right. So if we manipulate this to comedy, this will give us the console.log on the bottom. So this is basically how we're running our functions. These are called arguments or parameters. When you declare the function, you are declaring a parameter. When you invoke the function, you are passing in an argument. So there are different ways that you refer to this thing that you're passing into the function. And as you can see, they are used to run different parts of your code within your function. If you pass a certain argument, you can execute a certain part of your code as opposed to others. You can pass multiple arguments, not just only one. So let's say type and time of day. So here, let's pass in like morning, night, and other stuff. So let's say morning. And here, we can do like another if condition. So we can nest if conditions. That's another thing. You can nest multiple if conditions, one inside of another. in order to execute certain parts of your code or other parts of your code. So we can say if time of day strictly equals to night, say something like console.log nightmares. Cool. And then we can use an else condition here to only execute one or the other console log. So we can get this from over here, rip it out. Whoops, take not so much. And then let's make this look nice. It's like that. Okay, cool. So if we run our function and we get the type of horror, we're going to move into this if condition. And then inside of here, there's another if condition. If the time of day equals night, we're going to have nightmares. Else, we're not going to have nightmares, and we're going to be just watching the movie. So right now, we should, when we invoke our function, we should execute this thing on the bottom on line number 6, because this is a false statement. Right now, it's not the night. So let's run it. Let's see what we get. Oh, sorry, not comedy. It was horror on the here. So let's try it. Watching horror movie. And yep, this is what we got into. However, if our argument right here, the second thing changes to night, this becomes a true statement. So you go into line number 4. So if we run this, we have nightmares, right? So you don't really need to only pass one argument. You can pass as many arguments as you want. And according to those arguments, you can have your function do some things or do other things, right? As opposed to other things. So I think that's one of the really cool things about functions. It gives us the power and flexibility to be able to do multiple things according to the certain arguments, parameters that you're passing into the function. And I think that makes it really powerful. Multiple variables, execute within the functions. Okay, cool. So now let's move on. Let's look at arrays. Okay, what are arrays? Arrays is like a line of different stored values. The idea of an array is to have access later on. I would just say it's maybe that. Array is like a line of different stored values. The idea of an array. I would just maybe say values. Like so. What is an array? Arrays is like a line of different stored values. Okay, so let's make a new snippet here called array. And let's declare an array. So we can say var line equals to brackets. This means that you are creating a array, and inside of this array you can put multiple arguments. So let's say it's a line of people. The first thing you can pass in is like Pancho. The second one will be like Maria, and then the third one could be like Ingrid. Okay, so here this is an array, and let's console log at the bottom. Console.log. Let's do this, and let's always name our consoles. So this is the array, and then go like this. Then inside of here, now we can do line. So we should be able to console log that array on the bottom. So if we click on it, we can see this is the array, and this is the structure that we're building. I'm going to give you a little bit more on what arrays are. So if you actually see this console log, if you click on this little triangle on the bottom of the screen, and you can see that it opens up. An array has elements. Every single name that we see here is an element of the array. It's a place where you're putting these strings inside of, right? They're called elements. They're just like spaces inside of the array. So okay, so we have elements, and then if we look at this thing called length is like the size of our line. How many things are inside of here, right? The length of it. So one way that you can use this length is you can use a dot notation to the variable and then say length, and it will give you back a number, which is this thing that we see right here, the 3. So if I run this again, I will see that 3. If I add another person, such as, let's say, Alfredo, right? I see a 4. If I add another person like Tom, I see a 5. So it's length is just the size that we're getting. Let's go back up here so we can see a little bit more about arrays. Arrays are actually a data type. We'll get more into data types in a couple of lessons. But basically, in a nutshell, it's a way you can store stuff inside of JavaScript, right? Like you have a bunch of data, you want to store it in some way, reference it in a certain way. This is the way that we can do it. You don't necessarily only need to put strings. You can put also, for example, numbers like 7, and like booleans. You can also do that. So like true, and like let's say null. So we can also put different types of data types inside of the array. So let's run it again without the length. And we can see that we can put multiple data types inside of our array, not just strings. So another thing that I want to talk about arrays is that you can iterate over these arrays. So with that for loop, like remember we were talking about the for loop, we can say like var I or var number equal to 0, and then I is less than line.length. Up to what position do we want to stop? So we want to stop till we reach the end of the line, and then we can do an incrementer, which is number equals number plus 1. Yep, cool. So this is our for loop. It's going to iterate from the beginning to the end of our line. And something that I forgot right now to tell you about arrays is that the starting position. So think of it kind of like a line. Let me use Google Draw so I can maybe draw you a little bit. Draw on line. I don't know about that. I don't know what that is. Me quick draw. Let's draw. Well, never mind. I don't know about that either. Maybe this one? Just want to do a really simple drawing here so you can see it. But basically, the array, it's kind of like... Oh, that's taking a long time. Sketch.io? Maybe? Yep, cool. Looks good. How do I select a new color? Grid? I think grid would be fine. Okay, cool. So, right, let's say we have our array. This is our array. And we can have multiple names, right? We said like Poncho, comma Maria, comma Tom or something. All right. So just like in a line, like when you go to like the bank or something like that, you have like what seat are you sitting on? 1, 2, 99, 100, 50. The same thing here applies. Each individual element, each individual position has an index. And that index refers to like the seat that you're on. The starting index always starts at 0. So most people start with 1. In computer science, you normally start with 0, because that is the number that you start off with. We can get into it, but basically you start at 0. So this is position 0, Maria is in position 1, Tom is in position 2, so forth and so on. So these are the index values, the seat you're sitting on, the place you're taking place in, the place you're occupying within this line. So let me just do a quick thing here. So you can access that also before we move on to the for loop by putting square brackets. So if you put the name of your array, which is line, right? We can put in square brackets and that will refer to the index. So if I say index 0, I will console log Poncho on the bottom. So let's clear our terminal, run it again, and we can see that Poncho is the first person in that line. If I say 1 and run it again, who would it be? Okay, yep, it's going to be Maria. If I say 3, who would that be? Yep, it's going to be true, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. If I say 4, who would that be? Yep, it's going to be 7. Now here, question. What would this give me? Who is in position 5? What do you think will appear on the console log? Cool. Let's run it. We got undefined. There is nobody in that seat. So by default, JavaScript will return undefined if you're trying to access something within an array that doesn't exist. It returns undefined. Perfect. So now, let us console log. So what I want you to do now is manipulate line number 4 right now, or write it yourself, in order to console log every single person inside of, or every single element within that array. All right, so take some time, put pause on the video and try to do it yourself. If you can't do it, just press play and we'll do it together. Cool. So if we want to iterate using a for loop, accessing every single element in the array, we would just need to modify this 5 into an I, because I starts at 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, right? Until you get to the end. Whoops, I ran into an error right now. Oh, I didn't call it I called it number. So just be aware that whenever you build your for loop, always keep the declaration of the variable, the counter, right? The thing that you're using as reference to keep track of the number, always use it. So let's run it again. Let's see what we have. We still get undefined. Yeah, do we? Line.length. Whoops, I misspelled length. Also, these videos are not perfect. I'm just doing this on my free time. I think something that I always run into people with, and they have a lot of issues with, is that they're perfectionist, or they watch a bunch of videos where it's like on their first try, or they do very complex logic in a very short video. So I would be wary of that, because a lot of times I feel that it could become detrimental if you are putting super high expectations on yourself, and we're only humans. We make errors. It's okay. It's okay to make errors. Learn from them, and let's become better. But yeah, please don't feel bad if you forget a word, because I do a lot of debugging and I help a ton of people with debugging, and most of the time they are running into syntax errors, most of the bugs that I deal with. So please don't feel bad for that. We're only human. So If we run it, we can see that number is equal to 0. So we console log Poncho, then Maria, then null, then true, then 7. And this is how we can iterate over an array using the for loop. Cool. So I think we talked about arrays. Let's move on to objects, and then I think it's going to get pretty cool after that. So now we're going to talk about objects. Let's create a new snippet, call it objects. All right. So objects like room of locker, objects is like a room of lockers. It can have multiple data stored in it and can have numbers. The key is the number to the locker, and the content is the value inside the represented by the key. Okay. So what are objects in JavaScript? So just like arrays, objects are basically a place where we store all of these data and all of the things that we want to deal with. Arrays was basically like a line, right? We went like, hey, this is kind of a line where you have a bunch of seats starting with 0, then 1, then 2, and you can put different data types inside of those seats. Objects, on the other hand, are kind of like they're an encapsulation. So we're making here like analogy to lockers. So imagine we work in a store or a factory. Every single person has their locker, so they have a key, a space like 0001, or like 2099. That's your locker. Let's say sometimes they use like words on them, so like J2, 2B, that's your locker. So let's declare our variable called locker equal to an object. This is an object. The curly braces represent an object in JavaScript. And inside of here, we can have our number. Let's say our number is 2B. And that is, well, let's call it maybe with pure words. That way it's 2B. Easier. Okay, so 2B is the locker that's assigned to us. And the value that we have inside of there, it's like, say, taco. So that what we have on this side of the colon is our locker, right? The number of locker that refers to you. On the other side of the colon is the value, the actual thing you're referring to. So this is an object. So you can console log from this object here. So if we say console.log, we can access stuff from this locker. Locker refers to the whole object, and then you can use bracket notation to B. And what we should get back here is the actual toggle, because we're referring to the object in this key. So we want the value. JavaScript will return whatever's inside of that locker. 2B is not defined. Whoops. What I forgot right now is string. So I think you need to put a string interpretation, because if you do 2B, JavaScript thinks that you're referring to a variable, right? So what I mean by this, it's like whenever you don't put the strings here, JavaScript will think, hey, he's talking about a variable. So if I say 2B here equal to a string called 2B, it will also work because you're referring to that string. So toggle. But just for right now, let's comment this thing out. Oh, these are also comments. Two little lines in the front of your declarations, they mean that they're comments. So basically they're just a way to comment out code and not run it within JavaScript. So please remember, when you use these curly braces and you're trying to access things from within your object, always wrap them in brackets. And we can see toggle. Okay, so let's say you're not the only person that works here. There's another person, and he has a locker of 9S. and let's say he has sushi inside of his locker. Sushi. So if he wants to console log his sushi, we can just say 9s, and we can see the console log here on the bottom. So this is a way to store different information, and not just strings, but we can also like create numbers, right, or store numbers. So we can say num colon 1337. And another thing here, like if you notice when we're writing more things inside of our object, it kind of like it just feels weird, you know. It feels it's too long. So what people suggest doing in JavaScript, it's kind of like you want to create separate lines so it can become neater and easier to read. Because a lot of times if you have a line of code that stretches on for infinity, it's really like people will have a really hard time understanding it. So what I would suggest is to make your code look nice and neat so it becomes very understandable. So we can insert not just strings, but we can also insert numbers. We can insert booleans. So for example, bool, call it true, and then we can even insert arrays. So list, or let's say let's call it like those little trains that you put a bunch of carts on, like mini train. All right, so this could be cart 1, and then comma cart 2, right? And let's do one more. Cart 3. Cool. So we can insert strings, we can insert numbers, we can insert booleans, we can insert arrays, and we can even insert other objects. So like mini locker. And then in here we can even put an object inside of an object. An object, right? Whoops. Object. And let's say inside of here we have game, let's call it Mario Kart. Mario Kart. Cool. So inside of this object, we can insert a bunch of lockers. We can insert a bunch of different data types. There is one more thing we can even insert in here, and that is functions. So let's say we call this function art supplies or draw, right? And we can set it to a function, and whoops, I forgot the end. Function. There we go. Whoops. All right. So if we say anime, right? Console.log, and let's say I drew, and let's say anime character, and then we can say anime here, anime char. So we can inside of our locker we can insert numbers, strings. We can insert all kinds of stuff, and we can even insert functions. So let's test it out. Let's see if we are able to console log this I drew anime character. So where is this function inside of? Where is draw inside of? Cool. Yes, it is inside of locker, right? So if we say locker square bracket draw, we are able to access that function, and then we can do parentheses to invoke the function, because this is a function declaration, not a function invocation. So let's see it. Let's say locker, and then string draw, And inside of here, we can do bracket notation. And let's say, should we do a Charmander? So if we run it, we can see I drew Charmander on the bottom. You can also access multiple things within here. So for example, let's say we're trying to access Mario Kart. Let's console log it. So let's do console.log, and we need to say locker because Mario Kart is inside locker. And inside of there is mini locker, and inside of there, that is referring to an object itself. So after you refer to the object, now you need to access another object, and you need to access this property within that object. So you need to put another bracket notation after that and say game. Let me put this as a string here, because if not, it will think it's a variable. So if we run this, we see Mario Kart on the bottom. Now, this is called bracket notation when you try to access something using brackets. But you can also access things with dot notation. So we can say locker dot mini locker dot game. And this is basically the exact same thing I wrote on top. But the cool thing about this is that you don't need to run a string. You can just just not put the strings that you're dealing with. Cool. So I think we learned about objects. We learned about different things. Oh, so there's one more thing that I want you to do right now. I want you to put a pause on the video, and I want you to create a for-in loop. I know that I haven't talked about for-in loops, but try to do your research and try to see how to work with it. And I want you to console log every property, right? These are all properties. This is a property. This is a property. This is a property. So I want you to iterate with a for-in loop in order to console log every single property. And then push play. If you can't solve it, please push play, and I'll try my best to explain it right now. Cool. So, in order for us to create a for-in loops are designed to iterate over every single element within a object. So the way you write this is saying the for keyword, and inside of the for keyword, you're going to put a variable, and we can call it, so remember, a property is made out of two things. Let's write it up here. Property, and inside of here, the first thing that it has is the key, colon, the value, right? So you need to declare what you're going to be referring to as the key. These things on this side of the whoops, I think okay. So we need to declare it. We can call it whatever we want, but I would say like key or property key. Then you put in the keyword in. So now what locker are you referring to? And we called it locker. So now inside of here we can say console.log, and what we're console logging is going to be every single property within here. So we can need to say locker, and then we can use dot notation so it's easier, and we can say key, and that will iterate over every single property, console logging the value. So let's refresh our terminal on the bottom, run it again. We got undefined. Whoops, did I write locker properly? I think we need bracket notation. So let's try it with bracket notation. Locker. Yeah, I think that should be correct. Oh, I forgot the Y. Alright, so there it is. Taco, sushi, 1337, true. an array, another object, and a function. Cool. So right now, try to do as much reading. I think alongside these videos, I'm going to give you a bunch of links to things that you can read. So please do the readings and try to do as much as you can. Study. Reading is incredibly good, and then we're gonna move on and do a bunch of more stuff. So it's always fun. All right, let's move on to the next thing. How do you create comments in JavaScript? So let's create comments. So in JavaScript, there are multiple ways we can create comments. I think the easiest way to create a comment is just putting a double forward slash, and then you can say this is going to work this way and this way, right? That is a comment. And you can leave multiple lines. This is another comment. Try it out. Right? So this is one way of making comments. That's for one single line. If you want to do multiple lines, you can do forward slash star forward slash this. And this can be like step 1, do this. And then step 2, do this. Step 3, do this. So this is another way of writing a comment. If you want to do multiple lines and you don't want to be writing forward slash forward slash forward slash forward slash, you can just do forward slash star, and then at the end do star forward slash, and you can do as many comments as you want. A lot of people don't really. One of the reasons why you want to use this type of comments is so you can create pseudocode. Pseudocode is basically what I'm writing here on line number 18. It is a way to write simple English, and then based on that, you kind of think about the problem that you're thinking about, write your pseudocode, and then convert that pseudocode into actual code. A lot of people don't do that, and I feel that I always help out people when they don't do that, and a lot of times they're just going in at it. And yes, that is great, but just like my art teacher used to say, before you can get to a level of comfort with just doing one single line and representing a head, a arm, a torso, right? Before you get to that point, you want to create structure. You want to create simple spheres, circles, boxes, cylinders, and then off of that you start putting more things. The same thing here applies with pseudocode. Pseudocode is a way to write your logic before you write your code, right? Because a lot of times it's hard to think of this complexity. So please be very careful. Don't jump straight into code. Like if you are, I feel like you might be running into problems that could be easily foreseen, right? Or not running into them at all. So just be careful. I am a strong advocate of writing pseudocode before you write your code. So please try to write as many comments and pseudocode as you can before writing code itself. And we'll be working on that together as we move along. So, all right, let's move on to how to create comments. How do you declare variables in JavaScript? Oops, let's rename this. All right, so how do I declare a variable? We said that there were, that in order to declare a variable, you just say var, and then the name of the variable you want to give it. And this declares the variable. Console, let's do console.log. This is the way that we can see it on the bottom on our console here. And let's console log that game. So if we run it, we see that game is just set to undefined, right? So if we want to say game equal to the best game ever, near automata, all right? We can create the variable, assign, it's going to be assigned to undefined, and then we can assign the value after the equal sign to be whatever we want it to be, a string, a number, whatever we want. Cool. So what are primitive data types in JavaScript? So let's just do this together. Primitive data types, we said that it was a number. So for example, the number 55 or something like that. True is another primitive data type. False, that's a boolean. A string like near automata, a name, a last name, anything like that. A undefined, this is the default. Basically undefined means there's nothing there, it's not assigned to anything, so it's undefined. I don't know what it is. Null, which is a temporary placeholder. It doesn't have any value, but in the near future you might put a value there, so it's kind of like a good manner. It's good manners to set it to null. What else is there? Boolean, undefined. Let me look it up. Primitive data types. So a lot of times when you don't know like all of the types, just look it up on Google. Primitive data types. A lot of people, I think they don't really Google, or they don't know how to Google. So I would suggest to also build up your skills with Googling, because it is a very necessary skill to have. All right, so we have strings, we have numbers, we have big integer, which is basically a representation of a really big number. We have booleans, true, false. We have undefined, which means like what I said, I don't know what it is. A symbol, maybe we shouldn't get so much into symbols, but symbols, I think they're just like emojis and stuff like that. And null, but actually let's just check it out. Let's see. Symbols, control find symbols. Let's go lower. Let's look at here to see exactly what they are. Symbols is a built-in object whose constructor returns a symbol primitive, also called a symbol value or just a symbol. That's guaranteed to be unique. Symbols are often used to add unique property keys to an object and won't collide with keys any other code might add to the object, and which are hidden from any mechanisms other code will typically use to access the object. That enables the form of weak encapsulation or weak form of information hiding. So symbols are actually interesting. This is interesting. So let's look at it over here. So where we have it, symbols. So if we say var sim equal to symbol, and let's say poncho in here, poncho sim, let's see what we get. Whoops, I think I didn't write symbol properly. Let's see it. Symbol. The following success new operator keyword type error. No, this is what they're doing. Symbol. Did I capitalize it? Oh, I didn't capitalize it. Symbol. Yep. So right now we're not going to use it, but basically it's a way to create a unique identifier in JavaScript. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. What are template literals? So template literals are a way to, let's call it template literals. All right. So what are template literals? Template literals, they're just a way to insert data into a a string. So for example, let's say var greeting equals to let's call it my fave game is, right? If I want to insert something in here, I can use the plus sign. But another way that we can do it is through template literals. So we can say like $, curly braces, and we would need to change our double quotes to ticks. And these are on the all the way on the corner of your keyboard. There are these little symbols here. So this is a template literal, and let's say we're gonna, let's do it like this better. Say like game equals to near automata, and let's change this to a console log so we can see it on the bottom. I think that would be best. Console.log. What am I console logging? I'm console logging this thing here. And whoops, that was supposed to be this. And let's put in game in here. So if I run this, you can see that I'm inserting this variable inside of here, right? So you can see my favorite game is Near Automata. And this gives you a lot of flexibility because it allows you to manipulate things in a very good way, in a very dynamic way, right? You're not binded by very like narrow things. So we learned about the power of functions last a couple of videos ago. So we say like var fave g game equals to function. Inside of this function, we want to take in a game, and we can use console.log, and let's just paste this inside of here, right? So now we can comment out this over here, and we can comment out this over here. So this is a lot more dynamic. It gives you a lot more flexibility. So if you invoke, we declare the function on line number 2 to line number 4. So if we invoke that function there, right, and you invoke it like this, and we pass in a game here, for example, Monster Hunter. Now, fave game. Whoops, I wrote an E. So let's run it again. My favorite game is Monster Hunter. So this is a more dynamic way as opposed to the way that we wrote it on line number 1 and 5. So these are template literals, basically the way that we're writing it here. We're inserting a string into another string using this syntax as opposed to concatenating it, right? So the other way was basically doing console.log, and what are we console logging? We're going to be console logging my fave game is, and then we do a plus sign, and then we can say game. So if we comment out this thing on top, this line right here, and let's just make it a little bit more different. So line number 4 should be able to console log. So if we run it, we can see, right? But this is kind of tedious because you're doing a bunch of plus signs. And let's say you're doing like paragraphs of text. This is like template literals are very, very easy to just insert into big text. What is the difference between var, let, and const? So I think the best way to explain this is the way that they're explaining it in Google. Let's go over each one, and we'll talk about them. So var puts the variable in global scope. So the functional scope right now, if you declare it within this this snippet, or on the console, you're putting it in the global space. But if you're declaring it within a function, it'll put it within that function. But it's still going to have like other parts of your application might have access to that variable when they shouldn't. Um, a let variable in kind of like it's kind of like that, like imagine where you have valuables and you go to a public place. When you use var, you're putting that valuable inside of a you're putting that valuable in a public place, so there could be security like vulnerabilities, right? If you use let, let's say you're putting let inside of a function, there's a little bit more security because it's within that block scope. We'll talk more about scopes and what they are and how we deal with them as we move on and we do more projects. But basically, let, it's kind of like you're creating that variable within that space, that room, so your room. So you can have your valuables in your room, and they're a lot more secure than, let's say, you putting them in a public place where anybody can get them. Const is also like let, but it's more secure, because let's say somebody has access to a box where you keep like your information, right? Your private information. Const, what it says is, hey, you can't modify this. Like you won't be able to do it. So let's maybe write var, a variable. So for example, let's say var var diary equals to text, right? This diary can be read by multiple people because they see the diary in the public space. So it kind of creates security breaches. Well, not breaches, but it could create security vulnerabilities that you might not want. Let, on the other hand, so let's say we're dealing within a function. If you declare let within this function, other places in your application, they won't be able to see that variable, right? If you're dealing within another function, so it's more secure. It's kind of like your room. So it's kind of like saying let cell phone equal to function, and you're doing something inside of here. So let, it's kind of like it's bounded to that scope. So your cell phone can only be used by you, right? If you put that cell phone maybe in another place, it can also be used, but like it's more secure because it's encapsulated within that block. We will get more in details and we will do different problems in the future. But for now, I kind of just want you to think about it kind of that way. It's just inside of a block where others won't be able to see it as easily. Const, it's kind of like let's call it another thing, like what, like value, no, maybe like PC or something, equal to an object. Okay, so well, maybe yeah, okay, so imagine like const, it's kind of like this thing cannot be manipulated into another thing. So for example, sometimes if you have access to a var, and you write, like, let's say you do injection to your application, you can manipulate certain values, certain variables to not reference, let's say they were referencing an age, they could be referencing a function, and then you can call that function, so you can compromise your application. What const does, it says like, hey, this has a value of an object, So you can manipulate that to become a function, let's say. And what I mean by that is this. So if I say PC equals to a function, yeah, I should get an error here. So let's run it. And it's telling me, hey, wait a second. You declared PC to be an object, and now you're saying it's a function. I can't do that. So it gives you more security. As we continue with it, you'll see examples of how it actually works. But for now, I just want you to understand that const won't let you reassign like the declaration of the variable to something else, another different type. Let keeps, it's kind of like it's encapsulated in that place where you declared it, so other functions might not have access to that let variable, as opposed to var, where var is kind of like more global and other parts can access it. So yeah, let's move on. Some math examples in JS. So let's do some math examples in JS. Math. So let's do some math in JavaScript. So we learned that 3 plus 3 will give us 6, and then division 2. So if you run this, it'll give you 4.5. The reason is because it's doing 3 divided by 2 first before the addition. So this kind of works like BEM does from math, right? Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. So just be careful with that, because like if you want to do some things first, you can, as opposed to others. So for example here, we can see that we get 3. We do the thing inside the parentheses first. 3 plus 3 equals 6 divided by 2 will equal 3. So just be aware that this type of structure gives you different results, and let's multiply it by 2, so we get 6 back again, right? So remember PEMDAS whenever you're doing math or you need to do math. It is not exactly implemented the same way as math within JavaScript, but a lot of the rules are followed within JavaScript. We'll get more into details as we move more along, but for now I just want you to get that general idea. I want you to create like 4 or 5 different problems and just try to go through it and analyze it. So let's do maybe 2 more here. Put pause in the video, and then once you do them, put play again, and we'll join back again. Cool. So now that you did those, I want you to let's do 2 together. So let's do maybe like parentheses, like multiplying maybe 2 numbers, like 9 times 9 equals 81, and then we can do another parentheses in here to say like division, maybe a 6 divided by 3, divided by 3, and then let's say we divide that in itself. So what do you think we're going to get here? Alright, let's test it up. 40.5. So if we see 81, and then 3 divided by 3 equals 2, so 81 divided by 2 equals 40.5. Alright, let's do one more. So let's see something like 4 plus 4 minus 2, minus 2 times 5. So 4 plus 4 will equal 8, minus 2 will equal 6, 6 times 5 equals 30. And I got negative 2. So it did it differently. It did multiplication first, because I wasn't remembering PEMDAS. So 2 times 5 equals 10. 4 plus 4 equals 8 minus 10 equals negative 2. So once again, please remember pandas. We'll look at math. There's this thing called math.apps. Well, math is an object. Well, it's built in, like, I would say kind of like API. It's a library. It's like this big object that gives you a bunch of methods. And if we put math here, or in the console, you can just put in math. Let me show you, so you can see what I mean. You can put here math, and if you do enter, you'll get back that big object where it'll give you a bunch of methods, and these are all methods that you can use. Right? So, for example, let's say like math.absolute. So let's say we have like a number that let's do console.log like .abs. Let's say like a number that has a dot on it, right? So for example, let's say we have like 2.3. Math.apps will give you the absolute number of that. So it'll give you like math.min, I think it was. No, wait. What was the round? Math round down. Math.floor. Whoops, I totally forgot about that. Math.floor. So in here, now you can floor that number. Because absolute will give you, like, if you have a negative number. So apps, if we have like a negative number, it'll give you the absolute number. So it'll modify it to a positive integer, which is 2.3. All right. So we'll get more into this with practice. Practice makes perfect. So definitely we'll get more into these type of problems as we use them, right? As opposed to trying to learn everything at once. That's not really how I usually work. I usually try to create problems. Once we deal with those problems, we try to research and try to find different solutions in order for us to learn the things that we need as we use them along. So, let's continue. What are arrays in JavaScript? We already went through that. Push, pop, shift, and unshift. So let's call it array methods. Okay. So push, pop, shift, and unshift are all JavaScript methods. So here we can say push, pop, shift, unshift. Okay. So the first thing, let's create an array. Var array equal to an empty array. So what do you think push does? If I push something, what do you think will happen? Cool. So when you push something, it usually refers to pushing something in. So you can push something into this line. I will push you into this line. So I can say array.push, and this is a function, so you need to invoke the function, and I can say you. So if I then console.log the array, let's run it again, I can see you are inside of the array. All right, cool. So that is push. Push will push something into this array. So let's say array.push, and what are we going to push? We're going to push a pox. All right. We're going to push a pog. There you go. All right. So pushing means like you're pushing things into the array, and you can push anything, any type of data type. Pop, you can take things out of the array. So you can say array. Whoops. And what pop does, it removes the last thing in the array. So right now there are, in line number 4, there's u and pug, and if you pop it, you will pop pug out of the array. So we're console logging it all the way at the bottom. So if you see this right now, pug got removed from the array, and now you are the only person inside of the array. Pop will just removes it. So if we call it again, if we call it twice, it will be an empty array, right? And we can run it, and you can see that we popped two things out of the array, so we remove those things. Shift. So let's comment out this right here, and let's say here task pug, and then maybe we can do like maybe we can do like Joker, and then we can do like VR troopers. I forgot. Okay. So shift. What do you think shift does when you shift something? So a lot of times I forget. I don't remember a lot of these methods. Like I do, but I don't remember like the arguments, what they're set. So a lot of times if you don't remember the arguments or how they're used, look them up on Google. So if you say JS shift, you will be able to see like the documentation for the given method. These are all methods that are built into the array. So we can see here that we have an array, and then when we shift, we're shifting everything this way. So it's kind of like a line. You're shifting, like let's say you're in a line, there's multiple people there, and you're going to shift the line. You're the one that's going to be dealing with the clerk, and everybody else moves one forward. So in the same way here, if I say array dot shift, what do you think will happen here? All right, what are we going to see in the console log? Yep, you are removed from that array. So if I call it again, who is will tax come out, or will VR troopers come out? Yep, task came out. All right, cool. So shift basically moves the line all the way forward. And I think it can accept arguments if you want. No, it doesn't actually take any arguments. That's cool. I thought it did take one argument. I forgot which argument though. But yeah, it does not take any arguments, so that's pretty cool. Unshift. What do you think unshift will do? So let's try it. Array dot unshift, and so right now I commented out the other shifts. So now it's you, task, Joker, and VR troopers. Who do you think will be removed? VR troopers or you? Whoops, on shift. Cool. So nobody got removed. Interesting. So now maybe we're not using unshift properly. So once again, a lot of times we might not recall how a certain method works. So if we don't know, we can visit the documentation and we can see exactly how it works. So let me make this bigger so you can see it. Okay. The unshift methods adds one or more elements to the beginning of the array and returns the new length of the array. Interesting. So unshift will add to the front of the array and returns the number of the current length, right? So for example, if I unshift, and we can console log it here, that should give us back 1, 2, 3, 4. So we should be able to see a console log, and we do. This is our 4. So if I shift, let's say a pug of Batman pug, we can see that Batman was the first one at the very bottom, the first pug. So unshift will add it to the back. So let's do another one that's called like green pug or neon pug, right? So Batman neon pug should be before you. And yep, we can see it here that they were added before you, right? Cool. So these are some methods that we're going to be working more with. Right now it's just like a brief introduction, and also please make sure that whenever we don't know like how a certain method is working, or we're not 100% sure, because nobody's a dictionary, or it takes a very long time for you to be able to work with it every single day till you find it, till you memorize them. But just make sure that to check documentation whenever we don't know anything. Whenever we don't know something specifically, and we slowly build up that muscle memory. Cool. So what are functions? I think we did that already, so let's skip that one. Scope. I think we're going to talk about scope a little bit later on, because it's a very hard topic, and I think I want to go into a lot of detail. What are Boolean values? So Booleans, remember we talked about them. Let's go to Boolean. So Booleans get their name from this math guy. Boolean. Here you go. George Boole. There you go. So George Boole was this mathematician from back in the day that came up with the idea of he called it Boolean algebra. It's right here. Boolean algebra is this type of algebra where you convert the logic into true or false statements, and we, to a certain extent, Turing used Boolean algebra in order to come up with modern computers, because it is basically what we're dealing with. All of these switches are basically ones and zeros. So it's the way that actually computers are working. I would suggest you read this article and also do a little bit of reading on George Boole, so you can kind of get a little bit more background. But it's really cool. It's really interesting. For us, just Boolean values are true and false statements. So let's go over here. Let's say like, we already did that if. Remember, I don't know if you remember, but if we say like let hungry equals true, and then we can say if hungry, if this is a true value, then we can say console.log let's go eat, right? Hungry. Misspelled it. Let's go again. Hungry. Let's go eat. So basically Booleans are just true, false statements that we can use in conjunction with if, else, if statements in our functions as arguments in any sort of way in order for us to be able to run certain things or not run other things. We'll get into a lot more examples as we move along with creating a bunch of toy problems. So the next thing, what is greater than, equal, less than, equal to? What are these values, right? So let's do greater, less than. Okay. So what are greater than, less than, greater than, equal to values? These are all implementations where we can use them to create a Boolean, like a Boolean result. So what I mean by this is console.log And what we're going to console log is saying like, is 4 less than 9? Is this a true statement or is this a false statement? So we should see that boolean on the bottom of our console. And if we run it again, this is a true statement. We should see true. If I say less than, this is a false statement. So it should be false, right? So we can use these greater than, less than, or equal to be logical operators that will give us a boolean value in order for us to be able to run certain parts of our code. So we can say, is 4 equal to 4? This is a greater than or equal to, right? And that should give us a true. So let's actually use this. So let's say here in Mexico, the drinking age limit. So let's say like let's say var, because we still using var. So age equals to 18, right? Here in Mexico, you are able to drink during that age. So we say if age is greater than or equal to 18, we can say console.log vamos por las caguamas. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, we should see this console log on line number 6. This is a true statement, so we will see it, right? If we are, let's say, 16, we should not be able to drink, so we are not going in for the caguamas. So we're not gonna get anything. We can do an else statement here to handle that false statement on the if statement. So we can do like console.log, and we're gonna say something like no podemos tomar. Cool. So if we run this, we're going to get that else statement because we are not over 18 or equal to 18 here in Mexico, so we can't drink. Cool. So these logical operators, greater than, or equal to, less than, or equal to, are expressions that will convert a statement into a Boolean argument, a true or false, and will work in conjunction with if-else statements in order to run certain parts of your code as opposed to others. We'll see more examples as we go along, but right now I just want to give brief examples and brief explanations. Okay. So if-else statements. So once again, here we can say, let's say here if you're greater or equal to 21. So let's make an example with the US, right? If you are greater or equal to 21, you can drink in the States. And then else if. So this is how we build else if statements. We just put the else if after the parentheses of the first block, and then you can put another if statement inside of there, saying like if age is greater or equal to 18, we can drink in Mexico. You can drink in Mexico. And then else console.log you should not drink. Cool. So if we are 16, we should not drink. We should see this statement, right? Because we will not hit this if condition or this else if condition, and we are going to be bounded to the very last condition. So we should see the last one. Now, on line number 16, on line number 7, if we change that to age 19, we should not hit the first condition. We should hit the second one, and we are not going to get onto the third one. So you can drink in Mexico if you are 19. If you are 21, you should be able to hit the first condition and skip the other two. So you are able to drink in the States. So this is how we can build a bunch of if-else statements, and these are called blocks. We will have more experience with them as we go into other problems, but for now, general brief explanations I think are a good thing. All right, so what is a switch? Let's create a switch here, switch. All right, cool. So in JavaScript, you have a switch. Let's actually go to MDN so you can see the JS switch. So always check documentation. It's always good to get the general idea. A switch statement basically is a way where you can go over multiple cases, and if you hit a case, you will do something, right? So what we can say is this is the way that you write the switch statement. You get the switch first, then you do parentheses to insert the thing that you're checking for, your cases, and then you do curly braces. Inside of here, you do a case followed by the result or the value that you're looking for, and then you do colon, and then you do like your actual logic, the thing that you will actually run. So for example, let's do that. Oh, and by default, you can set a default that will just return this at the end of the day. So for example, let's make a menu. So var order equal to something, right? We don't know what we're going to order right now. And let's do a switch. So the switch is the keyword that lets us say this switch. Then we're going to take in the order, and then we do curly braces. And by default, we should always set a default to our switch. So default is going to be set to console.log we don't have that in our we don't have that item. Cool. So by default, if we don't have anything, we're gonna say we don't make that here, right? We don't have that item, and that could be our default case. We might not have that, so we don't have that item if we pass something that we don't have a case for. If I say let's say taco, right? I want to order a taco. The way that we write that case is going to be case, and then we do the name of the thing, the value. So we need to say taco, and then we need to do colon, 2 dots in order to run some sort of code. So right now we're just going to console log it, console.log the current value. So we're going to say like here is your taco, Cool. So if we run this, we should get back the console.log on the bottom, and we see that we actually do. Here's your taco. However, here we hit the default also. So if you don't break out of the current case, out of the current switch, you will continue down the chain, right? Hitting those other blocks and executing that code as well. So one of the things that you have to do that is extremely important, and a lot of times people don't pay attention and they're playing with their cell phones most of the time, and they're just like spending time on other things that they shouldn't be, when they should be paying attention on switch statements, because they are extremely important, and you will use them in servers, databases, JavaScript, menu system, routes, routing, middleware. So you're gonna use switches in many different things. So one of the things that people always forget and they always run into bugs into is with break statements. They don't break out of their code. So you need to put here a break, right? Like this. So if you break out of it, now you don't hit the default action, right? So here, these console logs right now are very simple to understand, but sometimes you're going to be running functions as opposed to actual console logs. So let's say we serve another thing here, like case. What else should we serve in our restaurant? Pizza or something. I don't know. All right, and if we make a pizza, we're gonna console.log. Here is your pizza. Cool. Whoops, I misspelled pizza. All right, and like we said, if we don't do this, we're not gonna break out of the switch, and we're gonna hit the default. So if we run this and we let's put lowercase pizza here. Whoa, what happened? Okay. Pizza. Hey, I don't want to capitalize. No. And whoops, I didn't put a semicolon up there. I put a semicolon. I didn't put a colon. 2 little dots is the thing that we need. So right now, if I run this, I'm gonna hit the pizza console log, but I will also hit the default one, and I can see that I do. So once again, we need to hit the break statement. There are times where you actually need to go into other sections. In that case, you leave the break out of it, but in most cases you don't, so you want to break out of it. Cool. So this is basically a switch statement. I want you to create your own switch statement with like movie or movies that you watch, and create your own switch with your movies. And right, I'm going to watch Star Wars. I'm going to watch Jurassic Park. I'm going to watch The English Patient or something like that, right? Cool. Once you do that, please continue with the rest of the videos and we'll continue onward. What are objects in JavaScript? I think our explanation of objects was pretty on par, so I don't think I'm going to do that. What are loops? While loops. While loops. While loops are also something that we use all the time. While loops are basically a way to run code over and over and over until a certain condition is met. So this is very different from for loops to for in loops, right? That will iterate over an object, or you create a variable till you hit like 0 through 9, right? While loops just continue onward until a certain thing is used for, a certain condition is met. So you can say like, I'm going to make one very simple right now. So we can say like var counter equal to 30. Let's say 30 people are inside of our class. And we can say while this statement is true, do this. While what's inside of the parentheses is true, you continue doing this, right? So if counter is greater than 0, you continue saying here. So we're going to do a simple console log, console.log. Hello, student number, and then let's do a plus sign with counter. Hello, student number. We could have also used string interpolation in here, which I would say, or temperate literals, I'm sorry. So I would suggest you using that as an extra challenge. And now in here, we're gonna, if we run this, what do you think will happen? If you set a for, you will run into an infinite loop, you are completely right. If we run this, we are going to write into an infinite loop. Why? Because counter will always be greater than 0. So inside of our while loop, we can set counter equals to 1. This is the exact same thing as writing counter equals counter minus 1, right? It's just a shorter version. What I wrote in line number 5. So once you counter is less than not greater than 0. Once it's 0, you will not continue into this while loop. So you can see here, we got all of these console logs. Hello, student number 30, all the way up to 1, and then we stop at 0. So this is a very powerful thing because I will give you challenges where you will be iterating over a nested object that is a huge object, and or graphs, or maybe we can use some in linked list also. So I would suggest you do a couple of problems with while loop. But yeah, we'll get there. So this is basically a while loop. While this statement is true, do this logic until you can't do it anymore. That statement is not true. What is a for loop? For loop, we already went into for in loop and a regular for loop, so we're not going to do much of that. What is a for in loop? We already did that. Nesting loops in JavaScript. Nesting loops. So let me give you one example. Nesting loops. Okay. So nesting loops. So I'm going to do a very simple example. Imagine that you have a school, and in that school you have a bunch of classes. I would need to iterate over each individual class in order for it to console log the individual names of every single person inside of a class in the whole school. So let's make it. Let's say we have a whole school, and I want to go into each individual class to console log the name of every student in that class. So let's make a school. Var school equals to an object. Yeah, let's do it. We can do it into an array. We can do an object. We can do a bunch of stuff. But let's make it into... Yeah, let's make it into an object. And inside of this object, we have class. Maybe we can do 1. And then we can do an array. And then we can say, comma. Let's make 3 classes here. 2. Actually, no, let's call it class 1. Class 1. Then we can call it class 2. And then we can do that into an object. And then class 3. And then do that into an array as well. Okay, so what can we use to iterate over an object? If you said a for in loop, you are completely right. So we can use a for loop, and then we can... So you remember what was the first thing we needed for a for in loop? Yes, we need a key. So we can say var key in school. School is the object that we're iterating over, right? And then you do curly braces so you can write your code, the thing that you want to do. For now, let's just console log it. Console.log. And what are we going to console.log? We're just going to console log the key. So we should see here class 1, class 2, class 3. So let's run this. School. Whoops, I misspelled school. Cool. So yes, I do see class 1, class 2, and class 3. Okay. So now let's put students into each class. So let's put Freddy into here, then let's put Tom, and let's put in Joe. And then in class 2, let's make it into Maria, Ingrid, and let's do man, sometimes it's hard to come up with like names. Zoe. And then in the third classroom, we're gonna have Jess, Esme, and what's the 3-word name? Jack. Jack. Okay, cool. So now, how can I console log? How can I... So I want you to do this. Try it out. So here's my challenge. Put a pause once you resolve it, bring it back in again. But I want you to iterate over the inner array and say, you are in Freddy, you are in class 1. Tom, you are in class 1. Joe, you are in class 1. Then iterate over the second array and then say like, Maria, you are in class 2. Ingrid, you are in class 2. Zoe, you are in class 2. Then iterate over the third one. Jess, you are in class 3. Esme, you are in class 3. Jack, you are in class 3. Put pause in the video and then play it again once you solve it, or if you can't solve it, just push play and we'll do it together. Alright, cool. So this is what we're going to do. In order for us to be able to iterate over the inner arrays, we need to create another for loop inside of here. So which for loop can iterate over inner arrays? Yeah, just a regular for loop, right? So let's do var student, or actually a lot of people, let's just do it the way that most people do it. They do I for just the counter. We can say counter. We can call it whatever we want, but I is good for iterator. Then the conditional statement, which is I is less than key. So how are we going to access this array? Where is this array inside of? This array is inside of school. So we can say school dot key, right, dot length. And then we can say the incrementer. So I++. Cool. So now inside of here, let's just do a simple console log. Console.log, so we can see if we're inside. So we're going to just console log I and see what happens. What do you think we're going to see inside of your of the console? Cool. Let's see it. Uncaught reference error length. School. Maybe it wants bracket notation because we're using a for. Yeah, let's try it. Dot length. Key. Yeah, that should give us a value. Alright, if this is what you actually thought that you were going to get, you're in a good track. If it's not, I would suggest to pause the video and kind of like analyze the code and go over it. So the reason why we're getting 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2 is because the for loop outside, this for loop on line number 7, is iterating over the object, and it's doing 3 iterations. 1, 2, 3. The for loop on line number 8 is iterating over the inner arrays, and that is iterating over 0, then you're adding 1. 1, then you're adding it again. 2, then you hit your base case, which will stop your iteration, and you move to the next array, and then the next one. Cool. So now the simple thing here is just doing the console log that I said. So Freddy, how do I access Freddy? I say school at bracket notation key at I. That will give me Freddy, Tom, Joe, Maria, right? Whoever you want. I mean, whoever is in that current position. So now we can just say plus the string. So Freddy, you are in class. Let's do a space before you so you can, it looks nice. Class, and then we're gonna do another plus sign, and then we can do key, right? So now if we run this, we should see Freddy, you are in class 1. Tom, you are in class 1. Joe, you're in class 1. Maria, you're in class 2. And then so forth and so on. So this gives us a lot of power. to be able to iterate over huge, let's say each class has 30 people inside of them, and then um, a school has 50 classes. So it's you can go through a lot of data in a short period of time, and this is the power of for loops. Cool. Let's move on. What is parseInt? So if you remember what parseInt is, parseInt, let's look it up. So if we don't remember parseInt, let's check it out. Whoops, JS parseInt. So parseInt will convert a number or a binary into a number, right? So if you, or even this type of binary, I forgot the exact name of it, will convert it to a number based on the base that you give it, 16 integer, 32-bit, 64-bit, binary too. So yeah, we can try it. We can check it out. So here, let's go over to our code, and let's say var bio, and that is going to equal to like 0.0000001. How many zeros is that? I think I have a 0 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yep. All right. So now we can say parseInt. So parseInt will convert a given number into like an actual number. So we can say console.log, and what are we console logging? We're going to be console logging. Sorry about the firecrackers, they're outside. ParseInt, and the first one is going to be bio, comma 2. So let's check it out. Let's see what we get. We get 1. So maybe if we get another one here, what is this number in binary? This number is 65. If we get 4, oh whoops, a 1 here, right? That is number 73. So parseInt is a way to convert something that you read from your hard drive, sorry about the firecrackers, or something that you're putting inside of hexadecimal or any other form of writing numbers, and you can provide a base, whether it be base 16, base 2, base 4, base 8, base 32, and convert that binary or that number hex that you're given to into an actual number that JavaScript can understand. So if you look at their example, they're doing rough scale, which is this one. I think they're doing 16. So if we get this, we'll be able to see that number in say var. Let's put this outside. Well, no, let's just leave it here so it's easier. Yep, and that is 15, 0xf. So parseInt is just a way to convert a given representation of a number, use a base, and then convert it to an actual number you can play around with, 99, 13, 20, 80, whatever it might be. All right, cool. So let's move on. What is ES6? So ES6 in general, ES is the standard that JavaScript is built upon. So what is ES6? So let's learn how to use Google. ES6 is the newer version of JavaScript that was introduced in 2015. ECMAScript is the standard that I was talking about, is the standard that JavaScript programming languages uses. ECMAScript provides the specific on how JavaScript programming language should work. So I think the way that I joke around is in Mexico there's this thing called Infonavit, which is the people who build houses, And they're basically like, they use kind of like the McDonald type of framework where it's kind of like, this is the way that the house is built with this many rooms. And if you go to any Infonavit house, you can right away tell that you're inside of one, because it's a very standardized ways of building houses. In the same way, ECMAScript and all of these standards, whether it be ES5, ES4, ES6, they are standards of building this programming language. There are multiple engines that run JavaScript, such as V8 for Google, SpiderMonkey, and other JavaScript engines. So we can say JS engine, so we can see a list of all of them. Just say list here. V8, SpiderMonkey, JScript Core from Apple, Safari, Chakra from Internet Explorer. So these are some of the most famous ones, but there are others also. And these are the engines that actually run the JavaScript itself. So ES6 is just a new standard, and it's the latest standard, so we're going to go a little bit into it. Okay, so what are arrow functions? So let's make a quick thing here. Arrow functions. Cool. So let's make a normal function from the ones that we've already learned. So normal equal to a function. So we need to say the function. And then here, let's say like, so we can say like, this is the old way to write functions. And now var ES6. So maybe now let's say new equals to, this is the new way of writing. Well, the new way of writing a function. So we do an arrow, parentheses, we'll take in the arguments, right? So argument 1. And then you do an arrow to symbolize that this is a function itself. And then the curlies will be the logic that you're writing. So here, let's do a console log. This is the newer way to write a function. Cool. So if we invoke normal, whoops, like this, and then we invoke newer like this, they are both representations of functions. It's just that one way is using an arrow function and the other one is using the function keyword. ES6 is becoming the new standard, and I see it being written everywhere. For the server that I'm currently working on my job, we are using pure ES6. We do use here and there functions like regular forms, but for the most part, we're using ES6. I think it's a nice way of writing it. JavaScript does handle these arrow functions a little bit differently. I don't want to go into a lot of details right now. It's just brief. But in the future, we will see a lot more details on how JavaScript uses arrow functions differently than normal functions. But for now, there are just two different ways to declare a function within JavaScript. Cool. So, what is an arrow function in ES6? So this is the arrow function that we talked about, which is basically here. Let me write it in a comment. This is the arrow function. Okay. A lot of people get confused because sometimes they see this, and I should probably talk about it. Or they see this. Or they see this. So let's talk about each one, right? This is what I wrote right now on top, but there is also another way of writing these. So let's comment all of this logic. And let's do this one. So let's say var give me num equal to an arrow function. So we're going to do this, then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do these parentheses. So if I say here 9, these parentheses are telling JavaScript, hey, there's only one thing to return here. I don't need to use the return keyword, right? If I want to return something, I can just put whatever I want to return within here. So if I invoke that function, give me num, and then do a function invocation on the back, I can see that I'm getting returned back a 9, right? So this, using parentheses, will only return one thing. Inside of here, if I wanted to use this same syntax, let's actually copy this, comment this one out, maybe leave a space here so we can see it. So here, if I wanted to return a 9 here, I would actually need to use a return statement. So if I run this now, it's going to do the same thing as the thing on the bottom. We are returning 9. Maybe let's return a 3 here, so it can be different, right? So when you use curly braces, you have to use the return keyword in order to return something. If I use parentheses after the arrow function, I don't need to use the return keyword. I just need to make sure that I'm only returning one thing from within this arrow function. And then the other way is just doing it without any parentheses. This is also just returning one single thing. So let's maybe return here on 13 or something. And let's take that off. And then let's bring this over. Whoops. Like this. Let's comment this one on the top so we don't see that. So this is also just returning one thing, right? 13. So when we run it, we just return 13. Sometimes you don't need to provide an arrow function, like an argument here. The way that we're writing it right now with the var is different. So we're going to move this into once we start using higher order functions and seeing how this works. If you're just able to provide one argument and then return like 22 or something, you can also do that. For now, there are just different ways of returning without using the return statement. You just use parentheses or no parentheses at all. But yeah, we'll get more into those as we progress through our tackling JavaScript. Okay, so ES6, we can get rid of that. What is the spread operator? Oh, spread operator. Spread operator. Okay. So in JavaScript, there's this thing called the spread operator. The spread operator basically can, if you give it multiple things, it will spread them out. So let's say var array equals to an array of names. Alfred, Mari, and Joe. Okay. So if I create a function, I can use this spread operator to spread my arguments, right? So I can say name 1, name 2, and name 3. And then I can console.log all of these 3 things. Alright. So I'm going to console log those 3 things. Let's also say like var names equals to a function. and I can invoke that function called names, right? All right. So if I invoke this function, I have name1, name2, name3. And inside of this, I'm just going to do a simple console log because I want to see those. So I can use the spread operator, and this is how you would do it. You can just say 3 little dots and argument, and now you don't need to write like Alfred, Maria, and Joe. You can just use the spread operator to spread this array as arguments of this function invocation that I'm doing on line number 6. And it's like I'm putting Alfredo as 1, Maria as 2, and Joe as 3. And if I run this, I should see the console log here. And I do. So spread operators are just a way of spreading this data. The same way, a lot of, like the way that I use the spread operator most of the time is to create copies. So let's say we have that array on line number 1. And I wanna make a copy of this array. We're going to talk about how JavaScript stores data with primitive data types as opposed to arrays or objects, and building references to them. But we're going to get into that a little bit later on. For now, basically, let's say I want to make a copy of this array, and I want to say var copy r equals to an array. So what I can do is I can use the spread operator on array to actually create a copy of this array. So now I can say console.log this is r, and then comma r, and let's copy this on the bottom so we can see here copy r. Whoops, I think I wrote too many r's. And here we can just say copy r. So what I use normally the spread operator for on my job is to create a copy of an array. And here we're creating a copy of this array over here. So we can do that. And now you can see here. So let's say, for example, I wanted to modify some of the people from the copy, right? So I can say copy r. I want to change Alfredo. So he's in position 0. So I would use bracket notation 0. And let's say Alfredo was transferred out and they sent another person, maybe Zoe. And Maria, let's say they also changed her. So copy r at position 1. That is going to now equal to Carla. Right. So our copy array should have Carla and Zoe, and the original array should stay the same. So if we console log it, we'll be able to see that here, because we are manipulating those first two values on line number 8 and 9 from the copy array. So the copy should be the only one that's different. And let's run the code. And we can see here that it is. Alfred and Maria and Joe are the same, but we made a copy and we manipulated Zoe and Carla from the first two positions. So Zoe and Carla are there and Joe isn't. Cool. So this is two different ways that we can use the spread operator in order just to spread something, right? We can also spread objects, but we'll see that more in detail in the near future. Let's continue onward. Passing a function as an argument in JS. So this is something I do every day. And I think here I don't want to confuse you a lot because it's all you've already, if you are still watching, you have covered a ton of stuff. But I think I don't want to confuse you. You can pass in functions, so func arg. You can pass in a function as an argument to a function. So let's say let's say when I was 16, I wanted to go. I wanted to go to Mexico. Well, I came back to Mexico. But let's say another example. Let's say when you're 16, you wanted to go camping in your truck. You didn't have a truck, and you didn't have any gear. So let's say you create a function var go camping equal to a function So let's console log I went camping. I went I'm camping. So it's the present. I'm camping. Right? So this function, you can pass it into another function. So let's create a var weekend. And here we can just say another function oops, I was trying to write ES6. Let's stick for the old version of writing code. So let's say func here. So we're gonna pass in a function, and we're gonna invoke that function within here. So func. So what did I just write? In line number 1, I wrote a function that will console log I am camping. And on line number 5 through 7, I wrote a separate function called weekend that I can pass a function into that will be invoked within that function. So it's kind of like you're building a function and you're doing that action. And let's just console log something here also. Console.log this is the weekend. Cool. So if I invoke weekend, what will I need to pass in as an argument to this function? Yes, I would need to pass in a separate function. We can pass in go camping as a function. So what do you think we're going to get on the console log? I want you to think about it. Put pause if you need a little bit more time. And then once you have an idea, press play. So yeah, we got the 2 console logs. We invoke weekend on line number 6. And then we passed in camping as an argument that will invoke in line number 7. This is how we can pass a function into another function. You will see the use of this in the near future because this is very useful and I use this all the time. So for now, just see that we can pass a function into another function. Let's move on. Create JavaScript promise and have resolve and reject promise chain. Debug issues in JavaScript. Promises.
Let's take a break.
Yeah, I think this is actually better to explain while we're actually doing it as opposed, because right now it's just not going to make any sense. But promises are a way to build logic that you will call at a future date. I know that right now it might be a lot, but just keep that as what is a promise. A promise, I promise you that I will do something when I do that, right? Debugging in JavaScript. So what is debugging in JavaScript? A lot of times, yeah, maybe I shouldn't get into much debugging because you need examples. But debugging is just a way to find a bug in JavaScript. And I think examples will be the best, or when we actually run into bugs, I think that's when I should start talking about that. So, yep, let's get rid of this right here. What is type of used for in JavaScript? Oh, type of. Let's create a new one called type of. So this is just a built-in method within JavaScript that you can call it, and you can say type of. If I do a number, what do you think I'm going to get back? If you set number, yep. If I say no, I get back an object. If I say array, I get back an object. If I do an object, I get back an object. This is interesting. So a lot of times people get confused with this. For right now, I'm going to go into this in a lot more detail. But for right now, I just want you to understand that a lot of people say that everything in JavaScript, almost everything in JavaScript is an object. And the reason why is because of something called the prototype chain, the prototype. So for example, if I say var r line is equal to an array, and I say r line, right? Look at this. This is, when I saw this, I thought of it, yeah, it makes sense. Everything in JavaScript is an object. Because if you open up this array and you look at this thing on the bottom, this is the thing called prototype. And the prototype has all of these methods that we can use, such as push, pop, shift, map, length. But inside of there, at the very bottom, there is this thing called prototype. And it's referring to the object. And you don't have any more prototypes. So everything, well, not everything, but almost everything within JavaScript will end up in this object prototype. So type of, we got a little bit off the subject there, but type of basically refers to the type of thing that you're dealing with in JavaScript. And you can use that for debugging because, sometimes maybe you're expecting a number and you get back a string. Then you can go like, yep, that function is not returning the thing that I'm expecting. Let's move on. What are data structures in JS? So data structures, like we said, they are basically, they are arrays and objects. That's a data type. This is a data type. a data structure. We are going to do projects such as linked lists, graphs, and a bunch of other data structures, but I think we'll do them together. That way they make sense what data structures are used for. Data structures are a way to store data or store a lot of different things. And different data structures can give you different benefits or different disabilities, right? Like pros and cons. So what I normally tell students is that nothing is black and white. Don't every single day, well, not every day, but every 2 days, somebody is going to tell me the same thing. Hey, Francisco, what is the best way of writing this? And I usually always say the same thing. What is the best? Xbox, PlayStation 3, or Nintendo? Or are you a retro gamer that uses pure emulators? Is PC the best? What is the best? And then they start laughing. And I think that is true. There is no the best. There are certain things, certain structures that will give you pros and cons, and according to your problem, the thing you're trying to solve, that is where you need to see, what is this better? Is this structure better for my problem? Is this structure better for this problem? And that's where you will see. But we'll get more into that in the future. Cool. Object-oriented programming. Object-oriented examples, functional programming, pure functions. I think we should talk about this later on. For now, let's cut it. Let me go eat something, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about this a little bit more. And this was fun. We'll do this every weekend, and we'll make a bunch of little videos. with links to like reading material and references, so you can have a little bit more explanation. Please read. Programmers, a lot of times they say, oh man, you're some programmer that spends all day typing. No, that is not the case. Most of the time, you're just going to be reading and then thinking and then reading and then thinking and then typing some code. And then you break everything. And then you're going to be reading some more and then you're debugging. But most of the time, you're not actually writing code. You're just coming up with tests, writing pseudocode, and then writing code. So, yeah, we'll get more into it. This is going to be fun. Talk to you later. Bye.